stand up for a minute. But I was asked to say something about doing charitable work and helping the poor or something like that. And I'm really not too comfortable with that sort of discussion. In the first place, too often when we talk about doing something for poverty or for street people or something, what we're really interested in doing is running up our own flag and making sure that somebody sees our presence. And that we're going to put a lot of money into infrastructure and a lot of other stuff when we could just help somebody like Union Gospel Mission, who's already doing it better than we'll ever do it. But in any case, I didn't want to talk about just that because we're talking about the human condition. And one of the first moral obligations we have is to validate the humanity of people who are in these negative situations or conditions. You know, I often say that morality is a heresy, and I really believe it is because it's a substitute for a life in Christ. Because we have a code or a set of rules that we follow, and I hear people say really tacky things like, "There but for the grace of God go I," or "Hate the sin but love the sinner," which nobody actually does, of course. And talking about the human condition and how it's dealt with. It isn't just about finding people on the street and giving them a backpack with a few things in it and trying to expand on what the Crown is already doing. It's much more than that. And unless we're ultimately working toward overall social justice in society, all we're doing is howling at the wind with our charities. And this is one of the great things that we should be working for. It's very disturbing to see Christian lobby groups lobbying to destroy somebody else's civil rights or undermine some other group in society that they don't agree with. And not lifting a finger toward development, toward social justice. And it's a shame to say, but we actually have a substantial wing of Christianity who despise the concept of social justice. And consequently, these people are guilty of building weapons of mass destruction. The weapon of mass destruction, which is poverty, and of dispossession and disenfranchisement. And it's not just within our own countries that we need to worry about these things. I really think that so many of the issues that are theoretically women's issues are, first of all, human issues, but also men's issues. Even in our country, where we have, because of multiculturalism, we often tolerate things even up to the murder of women for honor killings in cultures and societies. But in other parts of the world where women are still subjected to female circumcision, and in some countries where you can cut your wife's nose or ear off and nobody will do anything about it, and things like that. I think these are men's issues because I think it's extremely degrading to us that our gender is being defined in some parts of the world by doing horrible things to women. And I think if nothing else but self-esteem ought to propel us to give some thought to those kinds of issues. It's all part of it. The other part of it is how we deal with people with psychiatric illnesses in our society and culture. And we see somebody who's, say, schizophrenic or bipolar or something on the street, and they're there because they're mentally ill, and giving them a backpack and feeding them doesn't acknowledge their humanity. There are the people who've been at our monastery who have these problems. A lot of them are very intelligent and very talented. And in their more lucid moments, they realize their talents and their intelligence and the fact that they aren't going to ever get to do anything with it. And that's so devastating that very often it's what leads people to commit suicide. And there was we've seen in some other countries around some unique human heroes where people have undertaken to change the system a little. And in Cuba, shortly after the revolution, before all the social democrats were killed off by the communists, the restructuring of the, under Dr. Diaz, of the psychiatric healthcare system, he had redeveloped it to such a degree that he had little theater, sports activities, and even there was a young woman there who had been an opera singer and had a psychotic crash. She became schizophrenic. And this usually happens to women around 25 or 26 years old. To boys, it's usually 17, 18, or 19. But he had gotten her to the point where she could still sing a quarterly concert. And he had provided for other people who had gifts in art and music to actually perform and do something with their talents. And part of what we've been lobbying the government with for the last over 20 years is to try to introduce some kind of programs like this in psychiatric health care. Because what generally happens is it's not always a conscious idea, but it's nevertheless lurks in the shadows of people's consciousness. That these are just a bunch of useless people who need to be fed and clothed and put out on the street with a pension of some kind. And that's really the way the government deals with these people. And instead of just trying to start a whole new infrastructure so that we can say, hey everybody, we're charitable too, we really should be trying to move governments and existing institutions toward taking a completely different perspective on these problems and situations, and really befriending people and seeing what talents and abilities they might have that we could be at giving them the opportunity to express. We're only just coming out of the dark ages when people considered mental illness to be some kind of demonic possession, and not realizing that things like schizophrenia are sometimes caused by a virus. Multiple personalities come from only one source, very severe childhood abuse. And it takes 3 or 4 years of very intense therapy to get a person down to 1.5 personalities and things like that. But of course, because there are multiple personalities involved, it's a legion of demons. So people would be totally shunned and cast aside in ways that earlier societies did not. More primitive societies, if you want to put it that way. Hellenic society, for example, had a much more humane and much more profound perspective on these things. And perhaps to kind of recapture it. The fact is that we've been warehousing people or turning them out on the street where they have nothing and can't cope. And what we really do is find them already in difficult straits and push them down deeper into the darkness. And all of the charity and all of the feeding and all of the clothing that we're doing isn't really lifting them out of the darkness. It's simply providing for their basic human needs, or their basic animal needs, really. And that's far from being sufficient, and it isn't at all enough. And it is not what the ancient church did either. You know, medicine was a ministry of the church. 2 cousins of Apostle Paul were the first of the young mercenary physicians, the mothers of modern medicine, as we would have them. And these 2 women studied with disciples of Hippocrates of Kos in Tarsus. You know, Tarsus was an imperial city. That's where Cleopatra went when she wanted to meet Mark Antony. Very important, so everybody there was automatically a citizen. And Paul's family were very wealthy. They were related to the Herods, by the way. And the 2 women had substantial wealth of their own. And they had, I guess, what we call a university. Anybody could set up shop, a free university, and teach. And the disciples of Hippocrates of Kos were there, and they were very much attracted to medicine. And at the time, there were medicinal hot springs in the Taurus Mountains that were more or less privately owned, so they were for the wealthy. So the 2 sisters bought one of them and Canadianized it, and opened it to everybody. So I say that in America, and everybody's always really horrified. And of course, they practiced prayer as well as, but following Hippocrates, tried to have some kind of pharmacopoeia, that they wanted scientific medicine. The eldest of the 2 women